Human beings are wired to believe the world they live in is stable, not because it is, but because believing otherwise is terrifying. We wake up, go to work, check our bank balances, and assume the numbers mean something permanent. We assume the rules will still be there tomorrow. The laws, the currency, the system. That belief isn't logic, it's psychological survival. If people truly believed their financial system could disappear, they would demand change. They would question authority, they would stop playing along, so stability becomes a story we tell ourselves, and every society tells the same story right before it breaks. Take ancient Rome. For centuries, Romans trusted the denarius. It paid soldiers, it built roads, it held the empire together. And then, slowly, quietly, emperors began shaving the silver. A little less purity, a little more copper. At first, no one noticed, until one day prices exploded, trade froze, and trust vanished. The system that felt eternal collapsed faster than anyone imagined. Here's the wake-up call most Americans don't want to hear. Every financial collapse looks impossible, until the moment it happens. People don't lose money because they're stupid. They lose money because they trust continuity. They assume tomorrow will look like yesterday. But money doesn't collapse when buildings fall or armies lose. Money collapses when belief cracks. And to understand why that always happens, we have to understand what money actually is. Because before money fails, trust fails first. Money almost never dies all at once. It doesn't collapse in a single explosion. It dies slowly, quietly. While people are still using it every day, this is how it usually happens. In the ancient world, debasement was physical. Rulers shaved coins, they mixed silver with copper. They stretched the same amount of money thinner and thinner. The coin looked the same, but it wasn't. That's debasement in its purest form. Same face value, less real value inside. Modern systems do the same thing, they just do it without metal. Today, no one shaves coins. They expand balance sheets. They have lower interest rates. They create money digitally, invisibly, efficiently. The effect is identical. More money chasing the same goods, prices rise, purchasing power falls. That slow erosion has a name we're supposed to find harmless: inflation. But inflation isn't a natural disaster, it's a policy choice. History proves this again and again. In the late Roman Empire, the denarius lost over 90% of its silver content. At first, trade continued. Then prices surged. Then trust vanished. Fast forward to today, no silver is shaved, but trillions are created in months. And the result feels familiar. Groceries cost more. Housing drifts out of reach. Savings quietly buy less each year. Here's the dangerous part. Most people don't notice debasement while it's happening. They only feel it later. As stress, as anxiety, as a sense that they're working harder for less. That's the real lesson for individuals. You don't lose wealth when money is printed. You lose wealth when you hold money that's being diluted. Debasement isn't theft by force, it's theft by delay. And once enough people realize what's happening, the damage is already done. Because when money starts to fail, it doesn't just lose value, it changes who holds power, and that's where collapse turns into redistribution. Here's the part of the collapse most people never understand. Wealth doesn't vanish. It moves. Every crisis looks like destruction on the surface. Businesses close, jobs disappear, savings shrink. But underneath that chaos is a transfer. From those who are forced to sell to those who are able to buy. History makes this painfully clear. When the Black Death swept through Europe in the 14th century, up to half the population died. Cities emptied, fields were abandoned. At first glance, it looked like total ruin. But something strange happened next. Labor became scarce, land became cheap. Survivors who had liquidity, silver, tools, food, or simply the ability to work, suddenly held the leverage they had never had before. Peasants became landowners. Workers demanded higher wages. Wealth didn't disappear, it changed hands. Fast forward to modern times. During COVID, millions lost jobs. Small businesses collapsed. Entire industries froze. At the same time, those with cash, access to credit or assets watched opportunity appear everywhere. Homes were bought. Stocks rebounded almost instantly. Inequality widened at record speed. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Crises don't reward effort, they reward position. If you live paycheck to paycheck, you are forced to sell when prices fall. If you have liquidity, you get to buy when others panic. That's not moral, it's mechanical. Collapse doesn't care how hard you worked. It cares what you were holding when the pressure hit. And this is where most people make their next mistake. They assume the institutions they trust, the banks, the corporations, the financial giants, will protect them when things go wrong. History suggests the opposite. Banks don't fail because they are small. They fail because they are fragile. Size doesn't make an institution safe. It makes it dangerous. History learned this lesson long before modern finance. In the 14th century, Florence was the financial heart of Europe. Its banks were enormous for their time. Powerful, respected, untouchable, or so everyone believed. Families like the Bardi and the Peruzzi lent vast sums to kings, especially to Edward III of England. When the king defaulted, the banks collapsed like dominoes. Depositors were wiped out. Trade froze. An entire city learned that reputation is not a guarantee. Fast forward to the modern world. In 2008, Lehman Brothers collapsed almost overnight. In 2023, regional banks fell in days once confidence cracked. Different centuries, same pattern. Here's why too big to fail is a fairy tale. Large institutions are more leveraged, more interconnected, more exposed to political pressure. When they fail, they don't absorb the shock, they transmit it. And when the damage spreads, someone has to pay. It's almost never the executives, it's the depositors, the pension holders. The ordinary people who trusted the logo on the building. That leads to the only lesson that actually matters for savers. Your money in a bank is not stored, it's used. You are not a customer, you are a creditor. And creditors only get paid as long as the system survives. This isn't ancient history. And it isn't theoretical. Because even the United States, the country most people believe is immune, has already lived through what happens when trust in money and institutions breaks. Most Americans believe currency collapse is something that happens somewhere else. In failed states, in distant countries, in foreign histories. That belief is comforting. And it's wrong. Because the United States has already lived through it. During the Civil War, both sides discovered the same brutal truth. Wars are expensive, and gold runs out fast. In the North, the government issued greenbacks. Paper money is not backed by gold, backed instead by faith in the Union itself. At first, it worked. Soldiers were paid. Factories kept running. But as more bills flooded the economy, prices began to rise. Wages fell behind. Confidence weakened. In the South, it was worse. The Confederacy printed money relentlessly. Graybacks poured into circulation. By the end of the war, inflation wasn't a statistic. It was a daily humiliation. Paychecks became meaningless before they were spent. Families carried stacks of bills that couldn't buy a loaf of bread. Lifelong savings evaporated, not because people were reckless, but because they trusted their country in wartime. Here's the line most Americans never hear. Currency collapse is not un-American. It's already part of American history. And when it happened, paper promises didn't protect people. Land did. Food did. Hard assets did. Those who held something real survived. Those who held paper learned the truth too late. And this is where the story widens. Because currency collapse rarely happens alone. It travels with political stress, with social fracture, with revolutions, unrest, and desperation. And when those forces collide, money doesn't just weaken, it breaks. Sometimes money doesn't decay slowly. Sometimes it dies overnight, not because of markets, but because politics snaps. Revolutions and state crises don't negotiate with money. They erase it. Look at revolutionary France. In the 1790s, the old order collapsed. The monarchy fell. Church property was seized. To fund the revolution, the government printed a new currency, the assignats, paper money, backed by confiscated land. At first, people accepted it because they had no choice. Then more was printed, and more and more. Prices exploded, wages collapsed, farmers stopped selling food for paper, bread riots returned to Paris, and the revolution began devouring itself. Money didn't fail slowly. It failed the moment people refused to believe in it. Now, fast forward to modern times. Lebanon, 2019. Banks didn't announce a collapse, they simply stopped paying. One morning, people woke up and could no longer access their own savings. This is what a bank freeze looks like in real life. Your money is still there, on a screen. But withdrawals are limited, transfers are blocked, foreign currency is forbidden, capital controls sound technical. In practice, they mean this: you can't leave, and neither can your money. Here's the terrifying insight history keeps repeating. In a crisis, your bank balance is not a guarantee, it is a permission. And permissions can be revoked overnight. People don't lose access to money because they did something wrong. They lose it because the system is under stress and survival becomes political. And when governments are cornered, they don't protect savers. They protect themselves. This is where the story expands beyond borders. Because once money is trapped, the next danger isn't inflation. It's debt, especially debt tied to currencies you don't control. And that's where local collapse turns into a global trap. There is one mistake that turns a crisis into a catastrophe: borrowing in a currency you don't control. History punishes this mistake without mercy. In 1997, it started in Thailand. The economy was booming, money was cheap, confidence was high. Companies and governments borrowed heavily in US dollars. Why not? Interest rates were lower, the exchange rate was stable, until it wasn't. When the Thai baht collapsed, debts didn't shrink, they exploded. Overnight, the same loan required twice the local income to repay, then 3 times. Then it became impossible. The crisis spread across Asia, Indonesia, South Korea, Malaysia. Businesses collapsed, jobs vanished, savings were crushed. And here's the brutal asymmetry: the lenders survived, the borrowers drowned, because debt in someone else's currency turns exchange rates into weapons. You earn in one money, you owe in another. When trust breaks, your income falls while your obligations grow. Now bring this lesson home. You don't need to be a country to fall into this trap. If your mortgage depends on rates you don't control, if your credit card balance grows faster than your income, if your debt assumes stability that history never guarantees, you're exposed not to markets, but to fragility. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Debt works in good times because it assumes continuity. Collapse breaks that assumption. And when it does, the question is no longer about returns. It's about survival. So after all this history, after empires, revolutions, banks, and currencies falling apart, we're left with one final question. When systems fail, what actually survives? Most Americans believe currency collapse is something that happens somewhere else. in failed states, in distant countries, in foreign histories. That belief is comforting, and it's wrong, because the United States has already lived through it. During the Civil War, both sides discovered the same brutal truth. Wars are expensive, and gold runs out fast. In the North, the government issued greenbacks. Paper money is not backed by gold, backed instead by faith in the Union itself. At first, it worked. Soldiers were paid. Factories kept running. But as more bills flooded the economy, prices began to rise. Wages fell behind. Confidence weakened. In the South, it was worse. The Confederacy printed money relentlessly. Graybacks poured into circulation. By the end of the war, inflation wasn't a statistic. It was a daily humiliation. Paychecks became meaningless before they were spent. Families carried stacks of bills that couldn't buy a loaf of bread. Lifelong savings evaporated, not because people were reckless, but because they trusted their country in wartime. Here's the line most Americans never hear. Currency collapse is not un-American. It's already part of American history. And when it happened, paper promises didn't protect people. Land did. Food did. Hard assets did. Those who held something real survived. Those who held paper learned the truth too late. And this is where the story widens. Because currency collapse rarely happens alone. It travels with political stress, with social fracture, with revolutions, unrest, and desperation. And when those forces collide, money doesn't just weaken, it breaks. At this point, a lot of people make the wrong turn. They hear collapse and their minds jump straight to extremes. Hoarding, isolation, fear disguised as preparation. That's not survival. That's panic with a plan. Real preparation is quieter than that, and it's far more effective. History shows the same framework working again and again, not just for nations, for individuals. It has 3 layers. The first layer is assets, not paper claims. Things the system can't create at will. Land, productive tools, resources with real-world demand. Assets anchor you when money weakens. The second layer is liquidity, not to speculate, not to gamble. Liquidity gives you optionality. When others are forced to sell, you get to choose. Liquidity turns to collapse from a threat into a window. The third layer is skills, the most underestimated protection of all. Skills don't freeze, they don't get diluted, they don't depend on permission. When systems fail, skills travel with you. Now here's where many people go wrong. They over-prepare for the wrong risks. They obsess over the exact moment of collapse. They bet everything on one scenario. They sacrifice flexibility for certainty. History punishes that mindset, because collapse never arrives the way people expect. The goal isn't to predict the future perfectly. It's to avoid being fragile no matter what future arrives. Preparation is not fear. It's alignment with reality. You don't need to distrust everything. You just need to understand what depends on trust and what doesn't. When you hold real assets, maintain liquidity, and invest in skills, you don't panic when headlines hit. You observe, you adapt, you wait. And that's when preparation stops being defensive and starts becoming strategic, because now you're ready for the final truth history teaches. Collapse doesn't just test systems, it reveals who was ready all along. History leaves us the same message, written in different centuries with different names, but the same outcome. Systems feel permanent until they aren't. Money feels solid until trust breaks. Institutions feel protective until they protect themselves first. Collapse is always a tragedy. Savings vanish, lives are upended, certainty disappears. But history also shows something harder to accept. Collapse is a filter. It strips away illusions, it exposes fragility, and it rewards those who prepared quietly, long before panic arrived. The survivors weren't the ones who trusted the system the most. they were the ones who understood its limits. They held real assets. They kept liquidity. They built skills that didn't depend on permission. They didn't predict the future perfectly. They just avoided being fragile. So here's the question history forces on all of us. If the illusion broke tomorrow, what would you still have that actually holds value? That's not a question about fear. It's a question about clarity. And if you want to keep learning how history answers questions like this, subscribe to the channel. And let me know in the comments, what do you think holds real value when systems fail? Because history doesn't warn us to scare us, it warns us to prepare. And in the end, collapse doesn't decide who survives. Preparation does.